The unthinkable gift. John Carter never thought he would end up floating in deep space, staring at a dying alien. But here he was. The space station Argos 9 was supposed to be safe. Just another boring shift as an engineer, fixing broken panels and checking power systems. But when the distress signal came in, everything changed. John had responded to the call out of duty, expecting maybe a stranded ship or a simple malfunction. Instead, he found an alien barely clinging to life inside a damaged escape pod. The creature was tall and humanoid, with dark blue skin and glowing silver eyes that were now flickering like a fading light bulb. Its breathing was slow, shallow. John knelt beside it, trying to assess the injuries. Blood, dark and thick, seeped from a wound in its side. The alien's armor was shattered, and its body trembled with pain. John tapped the communicator on his wrist. "This is Carter. I found a survivor, but he's in bad shape. Medical team, respond." Static. No response. The alien weakly turned its head, barely able to speak. "No. Time. Help. Please." John swallowed hard. His medical training was limited. Patching up human injuries was one thing, but an alien. He checked the pod system for a medical scanner. The screen flickered, showing a critical warning in an unknown language, but the symbols were clear enough. Severe blood loss. Immediate transfusion required. John frowned. Transfusion. I don't even know your blood type. The alien struggled to lift its hand, pressing a control on the pod. A robotic voice translated. Compatible match. Human blood. Sufficient. Please. John froze. Give his blood. To an alien. That was insane. What if it killed him? What if alien blood and human blood weren't supposed to mix? But then he saw the alien's eyes. There was desperation, pain, but also something else. Hope. John exhaled sharply. If this kills me, I swear. He grabbed the emergency transfusion kit from the pod's side panel. His hands were shaking as he set it up. The needle pricked his arm, and the machine began transferring his blood to the alien's veins. At first, nothing happened. The alien remained motionless. But then, its body jerked. Its breathing became stronger. The deep wound in its side began closing right before John's eyes. John's heart pounded. What the hell? The alien's silver eyes flashed open, now brighter than before. It inhaled deeply, then turned its gaze to John. You save me, it said, its voice stronger now. John's vision blurred for a moment. His head felt light. Maybe he had lost too much blood. He shook his head, trying to stay focused. Yeah, well, don't make me regret it, he muttered. The alien sat up, moving its arms like it was testing them. It looked down at its hands, flexing its fingers. Then it looked back at John with something close to awe. Something changed. John barely had time to react before a sharp pain shot through his veins. He gasped, clutching his arm. His skin tingled, a strange heat spreading through his body. What is happening to me? He whispered. The alien's expression turned serious. It placed a hand over John's, sensing something within him. Your blood is not ordinary, and now it is part of you. John's vision swirled. He felt his heart pounding faster than normal. His fingers twitched, and then a faint blue glow pulsed under his skin. His last thought before darkness took him was, what have I done? The awakening. John Carter's body felt like it was on fire. Not the kind of fire that burned flesh, but something deeper, like a storm raging inside his veins. He gasped awake, his chest rising and falling rapidly as he struggled to make sense of what had just happened. The last thing he remembered was donating his blood to the dying alien. Then, the pain. The strange energy crawling under his skin. And now, he was somewhere different. He blinked, his vision adjusting to the dim blue lights around him. He was no longer inside the escape pod. This place was bigger. The walls were smooth, metallic, but unlike anything human-made. Strange symbols glowed faintly along the surfaces, shifting as if alive. The air smelled sterile but charged, like the moment before a thunderstorm. And then he saw the alien. It stood at the far side of the room, no longer weak or injured. Its dark blue skin seemed to shimmer under the light, and its silver eyes locked onto John the moment he stirred. "You are awake," the alien said, its voice now calm and strong. John pushed himself up, his head spinning. He clenched his fists, trying to steady himself, but the moment he did, something strange happened. A faint blue glow flickered under his skin. His breath hitched. "What the hell is happening to me?" The alien stepped closer, observing him with a look that was almost reverent. "Your blood saved my life," it said, "but it did more than that. It has changed you." John shook his head. "That doesn't make any sense. I just gave you some blood. That shouldn't do this." He lifted his hand, staring at the faint glow. It pulsed, like it was responding to his emotions. "You were not supposed to be compatible," the alien admitted, "but you are. And now, something ancient has awakened in you." John frowned. "Ancient? What are you talking about?" The alien hesitated for a moment before placing a hand on its chest. "My name is Valak. I am one of the last of the Ketheri, a species nearly wiped out in a war long before your people even reached the stars." John narrowed his eyes. "Okay, and what does that have to do with me?" Valak's silver eyes darkened. "The Ketheri were once the protectors of an ancient power, something that only a few in the galaxy could ever wield. We believed it was lost forever." His gaze locked onto John. "Until now." John took a step back. No. I'm just a guy. A human. I fix things for a living. I don't do." He gestured at his glowing skin. "Whatever this is." Valak studied him for a long moment before stepping forward. "Let me show you something." Before John could protest, Valak lifted a hand, and suddenly the room shifted. The walls melted away, revealing a vast starfield stretching endlessly around them. John staggered, instinctively reaching for something to hold on to, but there was nothing. Just empty space. "What the?" "Do not be afraid," Valak said. "This is a memory, a vision from my people." John turned, and before him, a massive golden structure floated in the darkness. It was like a temple, but not made of stone. It pulsed with energy, ancient and powerful. Around it, fleets of ships fought a desperate battle. Laser fire streaked through the void, explosions lighting up the darkness. "This was the final stand of the Ketheri," Valak said softly. "We were betrayed. Our greatest power was stolen and hidden away, locked so that none could claim it. But before the enemy could destroy it completely, one of our own managed to seal it within the only thing that could keep it safe." John felt his stomach sink. "Let me guess. Blood." Valak nodded. "Not just any blood. The blood of a warrior unlike any other, one who could withstand the power without being consumed by it." John exhaled sharply. "And now you're telling me. The moment your blood entered mine, it reawakened what had been dormant for centuries." Valak turned, his expression unreadable. "You carry the same spark that the ancient warrior did." John shook his head. "That's impossible." Valak extended a hand, palm up. "Is it?" The moment John looked at it, a glowing symbol appeared in the air. It was the same color as the light under his skin. And somehow, deep inside, John understood it. His heart pounded. This wasn't just a coincidence. Something inside him had changed. And it was only the beginning. Hunted by the unknown, John Carter sat on the cold metallic floor, his mind racing with questions he couldn't begin to answer. His body still tingled with the strange energy that had awakened within him, and his skin still pulsed with a faint blue glow. He clenched and unclenched his fists, as if that would somehow push away the creeping realization that his life had changed forever. Across from him, Valak stood calmly, observing John with an expression that was part fascination, part caution. "I don't get it," John finally muttered. "I was just an engineer. I fixed broken wires, patched up leaks. I wasn't special. But now you're telling me I have some kind of ancient power." Valak inclined his head. "The universe does not choose warriors by their past. It chooses them by their potential." John scoffed. "Well, the universe chose the wrong guy." Before Valak could respond, the air around them shifted. A deep hum filled the chamber, and suddenly, the walls began flashing with warning lights. Valak's silver eyes narrowed. "They found us." John's stomach twisted. "Who?" Valak turned sharply and pressed a hand against the nearest console. Symbols and data scrolled across the screen in a language John couldn't read. But one thing was clear. They were no longer safe. "We have to move," Valak said urgently. "Now." John barely had time to react before the entire structure trembled. A loud impact rang through the chamber, and for the first time since waking up, John realized that this place, this strange alien structure, wasn't just some safe hideout. It was a ship, and it was under attack. "Who's attacking us?" John demanded, scrambling to his feet. Valak's jaw tightened. "The ones who destroyed my people. And now, they hunt you." A sharp hiss filled the air as the walls split apart, revealing a passageway leading deeper into the ship. Valak grabbed John's wrist and pulled him forward. "Come," he urged. "If they take you, you will wish they had simply killed you." That was enough for John to start running. They sprinted down the corridor, their boots echoing against the metallic floor. Around them, warning sirens blared, and strange alien symbols flashed in urgent sequences along the walls. John didn't know what they meant, but he could guess. Impending doom. Another explosion rocked the ship, and this time, the floor beneath them tilted sharply. John stumbled, nearly falling, but Valak caught him, steadying him with surprising strength. "They've breached the outer hull," Valak shouted over the chaos. John cursed under his breath. "Fantastic. And let me guess, they're not here for a friendly chat." Valak's expression darkened. "They want what is inside you." That sent a chill down John's spine. Before he could respond, a section of the corridor ahead was suddenly ripped apart. The metal groaned and twisted, sucked into the void of space as a massive figure stepped through the breach. John's breath caught. The creature was 7 feet tall, armored in obsidian black plating with deep red glowing veins running along its body. Its head was featureless except for 2 burning crimson eyes that pulsed with raw, inhuman intelligence. The very air around it seemed to vibrate with malice. It spoke, its voice like grinding metal. Target acquired. John instinctively took a step back. Nope, I don't like that. What the hell is that?" Valak's grip on John's wrist tightened. "A Chthorian hunter. We are out of time." The hunter lunged forward with terrifying speed. Valak shoved John aside just as the creature's massive arms smashed into the wall, leaving a deep dent where John had been standing moments ago. Sparks rained down as the lights flickered. John hit the ground hard, pain jolting up his arm. He looked up, heart pounding. Valak had drawn 2 glowing energy blades, their edges humming with power. He moved with practiced ease, deflecting the hunter's next strike with a sharp metallic clash. But it wasn't enough. The hunter was too strong. With one brutal swipe, it sent Valak crashing into the far wall, leaving him dazed. John's body screamed at him to run. Run and don't look back. But something inside him, something new, something different, wouldn't let him. The blue glow under his skin pulsed stronger, brighter. His fingers tingled, and then suddenly, a wave of energy burst from his palms. The hunter staggered back as the force slammed into its chest. Sparks flickered where the energy connected, and for the first time, the creature hesitated. John's eyes widened. Did I just? The hunter growled and moved forward again, but this time, John didn't feel powerless. He could feel something building inside him, a force waiting to be unleashed. He raised his hands, and the air crackled around his fingertips. For the first time in his life, John Carter wasn't just running from danger. He was ready to fight it. The lost world. The moment John Carter unleashed that strange energy from his hands, everything changed. The Chthorian hunter, an unstoppable force only moments ago, staggered back, its armor flickering as if the energy had disrupted something inside it. John barely had time to process what had happened before Valak seized the moment. The alien warrior recovered from where he had been thrown and moved faster than John had ever seen. His twin energy blades slashed across the hunter's chest in an X-shaped arc, sending a shower of molten sparks into the air. The hunter let out a metallic, inhuman roar, its body convulsing. Then, in a flash of dark energy, it vanished, either retreating or regrouping for another attack. John stood there, his breathing heavy, his hands still crackling with blue energy. "What the hell did I just do?" he asked, staring at his own glowing fingers in disbelief. Valak wiped the blood from his brow and turned to John, his silver eyes filled with something between awe and caution. "You awakened it," Valak said, stepping forward. "I was right. The power is inside you." John let out a sharp laugh, still shaken. "Great, fantastic. So now I'm glowing and being hunted by unstoppable alien assassins. Just what I always wanted." Valak didn't smile. "This is no joke, John. If they are willing to send a Chthorian hunter, then more will come. You need to understand what you have before it's too late." John exhaled, rubbing his face. He wasn't ready for this. He wasn't a fighter. He was just an engineer from Earth, for crying out loud. But the truth was impossible to ignore. Something inside him had changed. And it wasn't going away. Escape and the journey to the lost world. The ship was in critical condition. Valak led John through the corridors as fires burned and warning sirens blared. Every screen they passed displayed alien symbols, flashing in red, universal for things were going very, very wrong. "The engines are failing," Valak muttered. "We must leave. Now." John glanced around at the crumbling structure. "What about your ship? Can't we fight back?" Valak looked at him, dead serious. "We barely survived one hunter. If we stay, we die." That was all the convincing John needed. They reached the central control room, where Valak activated a holographic star map. A glowing projection of the galaxy appeared, and John watched as Valak's fingers traced across the stars before stopping at a single unmarked planet. "There," Valak said. "That is where we must go." John squinted at the hologram. "What's so special about it?" Valak turned to him, his expression unreadable. "It is where you will find the truth about yourself." John didn't like the cryptic answer, but before he could ask anything else, another shockwave hit the ship. "Hold on." Valak slammed his hand against the controls. The ship's remaining power focused into its last operational thrusters, and in a final desperate push, they launched into hyperspace. John barely had time to strap himself in before they were ripped through space and time. Arrival on a lost world. They exited hyperspace with a violent jolt, the ship shuddering as it descended through the thick atmosphere of the mysterious planet below. John gritted his teeth as alarms blared. "Tell me you've got a plan for landing this thing." Valak was too focused to answer. He pulled on the controls, guiding the failing vessel as best he could. Through the viewport, John saw the planet's vast golden deserts, towering obsidian mountains, and strange glowing rivers. It looked ancient, untouched. Then, impact. The ship crashed hard onto the surface, skidding across the rocky ground before finally grinding to a stop. Everything went still. For a long moment, John simply sat there, listening to the ringing in his ears. Then he let out a ragged breath. "Okay," he muttered. "That sucked." Valak unstrapped himself and stood. "We made it. That is all that matters." John groaned as he pushed himself up. "Yeah, Well, next time let's aim for something softer. The ship was beyond repair, half buried in the sand. Smoke rose from the wreckage as John and Valek stepped outside, the heat of the sun pressing down on them. John looked around. The planet felt different. The air buzzed with unseen energy. The very ground beneath his feet hummed with something ancient. "This place," John whispered. "It feels alive." Valek nodded. "It should. This is a world of the forgotten." John frowned. The forgotten. Valek began walking. "Come, I will show you." The hidden temple and the prophecy. They traveled through the alien desert, the sands glowing faintly under the setting sun. Strange creatures watched them from the distance, their luminous eyes blinking in the shadows. Eventually, they reached a massive black stone entrance, carved into the side of a mountain. It was older than anything John had ever seen, its surface covered in symbols that glowed softly, the same blue hue that now pulsed beneath his skin. John felt something in his chest, a strange pull, like he was meant to be here. Valek placed a hand on the entrance, and slowly the massive stone shifted, revealing a passageway into darkness. John hesitated. "I feel like I should be more scared than I am." Valek's gaze was steady. "That is because this place knows you." John swallowed hard and stepped inside. The hallway was massive, lined with tall statues of ancient warriors. At the center of the chamber, a glowing orb of energy floated above a pedestal. It pulsed in sync with John's own heartbeat. John took a step closer. "What is that?" Valek watched him carefully. "It is the key to everything. The power that was sealed away, waiting for the one who could claim it." John licked his lips. "And let me guess, that's me." Valek's voice was solemn. "You are the last descendant of the warrior who once wielded it. You are the only one who can awaken it again." John stared at the orb, his heart pounding. Then he reached out his hand. The moment his fingers touched the energy, a shockwave burst through the chamber. The statues cracked, the walls trembled, and a storm of memories flooded into John's mind. Visions of battles long past, of warriors who once carried this power, of a prophecy left unfulfilled. John gasped, his knees nearly buckling. Valek steadied him. "You must embrace it, John, or it will consume you." John clenched his teeth, forcing himself to stand tall. And then the blue energy surged into him, wrapping around his body like armor, filling his veins with the power of something ancient, something lost, something waiting to be reborn. The war begins. A storm of energy crackled around John Carter as he stood in the ancient temple, his body pulsing with the power of something lost for centuries. His mind felt like it was on fire. Visions of forgotten battles, ancient warriors, and a prophecy long abandoned flooded through him. He gritted his teeth, trying to fight against the overwhelming force trying to take hold of him. But he couldn't stop it. The blue energy that had been flickering beneath his skin since the transfusion with Valek was now roaring through his veins, responding to the temple's presence. He gasped as more visions assaulted him. A warrior like himself standing against an unstoppable enemy, blood spilled across alien battlefields, and an entire civilization lost to betrayal. Then, a voice. It wasn't Valek's. It wasn't anyone's he had ever heard before. It spoke in a language he had never learned, but somehow he understood every word. "You have awakened the forgotten flame. Will you wield it, or will it consume you?" John's pulse raced. He felt something coiling around his thoughts, something powerful, waiting for an answer. He clenched his fists. He wasn't ready. He was just a man, a human, an engineer from Earth. He had no business being in an ancient war, standing inside a temple on an alien world, with a destiny he didn't ask for. But as he stared at his own hands, now glowing with raw, unfiltered energy, he knew this wasn't something he could run from anymore. "I will wield it," he whispered. And just like that, the energy surged into him. The blue glow surrounding his body flared brighter, searing into his skin. His muscles tensed as the raw force settled within him, making him feel stronger, faster, sharper. His mind, which had been overwhelmed by the visions moments ago, was now clearer than ever. John Carter had changed. Forever. The betrayal of the Ketheri. Valak stood at a distance, watching John with unreadable eyes. The temple's glow reflected off his dark blue skin, his silver eyes narrowing slightly. "You accepted it," he said, his voice steady. John exhaled sharply. "Did I have a choice?" Valak didn't answer. Instead, he turned, placing a hand against the temple's inner wall. The stone responded, shifting and moving, revealing a hidden doorway leading deeper into the mountain. John hesitated. "What's back there?" Valak's expression darkened. "The truth." John followed him through the opening, stepping into a hidden chamber lined with ancient carvings. Unlike the outer hall, these weren't just symbols. They were stories, etched into the stone itself. And as John's newfound power awakened, he found that he could read them. His eyes traced the carvings, and the more he read, the more his stomach twisted. The Ketheri, Valak's people, had been guardians of the forgotten flame for generations. But they weren't just guardians. They had once wielded this power themselves, and they had used it for war. John's breath caught as he saw the next set of carvings. The Ketheri had not just been defenders. They had been conquerors. At the height of their rule, they had expanded across entire star systems, enforcing their order with an iron fist, until their greatest warrior turned against them. John reached the final carving, his heart hammering in his chest. It showed a single warrior, his hands glowing with the same blue energy that now pulsed inside John, standing against an army of Ketheri warriors. Their greatest warrior wasn't their hero, John whispered. He was their enemy. Valak's voice was low. He saw what we had become, and he tried to stop it. John turned to him, realization crashing over him. The Ketheri weren't wiped out by an external enemy. You destroyed yourselves. Valak's jaw tightened. He sealed away the forgotten flame to prevent anyone from using it ever again. He erased his own history, ensuring no one would follow his path. Until now. John clenched his fists. And now I have that power. Valak finally met his gaze. Yes. John took a slow breath. So what happens now? Before Valak could answer, the temple shook violently. The ceiling split apart, dust and debris falling from above. A deep guttural roar echoed through the chamber, and the air itself seemed to tremble. John's stomach dropped. They had been found. The battle begins. John and Valak sprinted outside just in time to see ships descending from the sky. Massive black vessels, their hulls lined with the same red energy markings as the Krithorian hunter from before. But this time, it wasn't just one. It was an entire fleet. The ground trembled as dozens of armored figures landed, their crimson eyes glowing through the dust. Their leader stood at the front, a tall, imposing being clad in dark, obsidian armor, its presence alone radiating power. John instinctively took a step back. Tell me that's not another hunter. Valak's voice was grim. Worse. The figure lifted a massive energy spear, its deep voice booming across the battlefield. The flame has returned. Surrender the vessel. John's fists clenched as the blue glow beneath his skin flared. Valak drew his blades. We fight. John let out a slow breath, feeling the storm of power surging through him. Then, as the enemy charged forward, he raised his hands, and for the first time, he unleashed his power willingly. A shockwave of energy erupted from his palms, slamming into the oncoming warriors. The ground splintered apart beneath them, throwing enemies into the air. But more kept coming. John barely had time to react before one of them lunged at him, its energy blade slicing toward his chest. Without thinking, John moved faster than he ever had before. He dodged the strike by a fraction of an inch, his reflexes no longer human, no longer limited. He countered with a burst of blue energy, sending the enemy flying backward. More surrounded him, their weapons flashing as they attacked in unison. But John wasn't the same person he had been before. He was something more. Valak fought beside him, his twin blades spinning in a blur of silver light. Together, they cut through the enemy ranks, their movements perfectly in sync. But the battle was far from over. Above them, the enemy fleet charged its weapons, preparing to annihilate the temple, the planet, everything. John's heart pounded. They were running out of time. And then, as he turned to Valak, a realization struck him. He wasn't just meant to wield this power. He was meant to end this war, even if it meant destroying everything the Ketheri had once built. The last betrayal. The battlefield was a storm of chaos and energy. Explosions rocked the desert as plasma fire streaked across the sky. The Krithorian warriors, dark armored figures with glowing red eyes, advanced relentlessly, their weapons cutting through the sand like fire through paper. John Carter moved with a newfound speed, his body now in tune with the power inside him. Every step, every motion. It was like something ancient guided him, as if he had fought 1,000 battles before. The blue energy flickered around his hands as he deflected a plasma blade, countering with a surge of force that sent an enemy flying. Beside him, Valak fought with a silent, ruthless precision. His twin energy blades moved like flashes of silver light, cutting through the enemy ranks with lethal efficiency. They fought back to back, the human and an alien, standing together against an army meant to wipe them from existence. But despite their strength, the battle was turning against them. More ships descended from the sky, blocking out the sun as enemy reinforcements landed. The massive figure at the head of the enemy force, the Krithorian warlord, watched from a distance, his crimson eyes glowing beneath his black helmet. John could feel the power radiating from him. This wasn't just any enemy. This was someone who had hunted the forgotten flame for centuries. John barely dodged an incoming strike when Valak suddenly grabbed his arm. "We can't hold this position," Valak growled. "There are too many of them." John exhaled sharply. He knew Valak was right, but if they ran now, they'd be hunted across the galaxy. "What's the plan?" John asked. Valak hesitated for the briefest moment, and then he said something John never expected. "We surrender." John's entire body stiffened. "What?" Valak's silver eyes locked onto his. "We cannot win this fight. Not here. If they take us alive, they will bring us to their stronghold. That is where we need to be." John clenched his jaw. Everything inside him screamed not to surrender, to fight until his last breath. But Valak's words made sense in a brutal, strategic way. If they were inside the enemy stronghold, they could strike at the heart of the war. John's hands stopped glowing, the energy fading as he forced himself to lower them. Valak turned toward the Krithorian warlord and raised his arms. "We surrender." The battlefield fell silent. The Krithorians stopped in their tracks, their weapons still raised, their crimson eyes flickering with uncertainty. Then, after a long moment, the warlord stepped forward. He tilted his head slightly, regarding them like an apex predator studying its prey. Then, in a deep metallic voice, he spoke. "Wise." Then everything went black. The prison of the Krithorians. John woke up in darkness. His wrists were bound, shackled by something that felt alien and unnatural, as if it was draining his energy. He groaned, his head pounding, as his vision adjusted to his new surroundings. They were in a prison cell, the walls made of some kind of shimmering metallic material that pulsed with faint red veins. The air was thick with an unnatural silence. Valak sat across from him, his arms folded, his expression unreadable. "Well," John muttered, "this sucks." Valak finally looked at him. "We are where we need to be." John let out a humorless laugh. "Right. Tied up and locked away inside an enemy stronghold. Perfect plan." Valak didn't respond immediately. Instead, his silver eyes narrowed slightly, as if he was waiting for something. Then the cell door slid open. 2 Chthorian guards stepped inside, their weapons glowing with a pulsing red light. Between them stood the warlord himself. The towering figure removed his helmet, revealing a face scarred from centuries of battle. His eyes were ancient and calculating, burning with something deeper than hatred. "You," the warlord said, staring at John. "You are not what I expected." John glared at him. "Yeah, well, I wasn't expecting to be kidnapped by space demons, so I guess we're even." The warlord didn't react. Instead, he turned his gaze toward Valek, and then he said something that made John's blood go cold. "You did well, Valek." As expected, John froze. His mind struggled to process what he had just heard. His pulse hammered in his ears. Slowly, he turned to Valek, praying he had misheard. "Tell me," John said, his voice dangerously quiet. "Tell me I didn't just hear that right." Valek didn't answer. The warlord smirked. "You trusted him," the warlord said, stepping closer. "But he has always belonged to us." John's body tensed, his fingers curling into fists despite the shackles holding him down. Betrayal. It burned deeper than any wound. Valek finally met his gaze. His expression was neutral, controlled, but his silver eyes were filled with something unreadable. "John," he said quietly, "you must listen to me." John's voice was ice. "No, you listen to me." His hands began to glow blue once again, despite the shackles trying to suppress him. The energy inside him fought back, refusing to be controlled. "You set me up," John whispered. "From the very start, didn't you?" The warlord chuckled. "He was always one of us. He knew the prophecy. He knew what you could become. And he knew the only way to control you was to earn your trust." John felt something snap inside him. The blue energy exploded outward, cracking the walls of the cell. The shackles shattered into dust, unable to contain the force that now surged through him. The guards stumbled back, their weapons short-circuiting under the surge of power. For the first time since this all began, since he had given his blood to an alien, since he had been hunted, since he had been dragged into a war he never wanted, John finally stopped holding back. He rose to his feet, his body surrounded by a pulsing blue aura. And when he looked at Valek again, his eyes weren't just human anymore. They were something else, something more. The final stand. John Carter stood in the wreckage of his shattered cell, his body radiating with the pulsing blue energy of the forgotten flame. His rage burned brighter than the stars outside as he locked eyes with Valek, the alien he had trusted, the one who had guided him through this entire journey, only to betray him at the very end. The Chthorian warlord stood nearby, watching with a smirk, his crimson eyes filled with satisfaction. His guards remained frozen, their weapons raised but hesitant, unsure whether they should move against the man now glowing like a living sun. John could feel it. The energy coursing through his veins had fully awakened. No more barriers, no more shackles. He clenched his fists, the air crackling around him. The power was now his to control. And for the first time, he wasn't afraid of it. "You lied to me," John said, his voice carrying through the chamber like rolling thunder. "From the start." Valek's silver eyes flickered with something, regret, or calculation. "John, I had no choice." John let out a sharp laugh, filled with pure disbelief. "That's the best you've got? After everything?" Valek's jaw tightened. "I did what had to be done." The Chthorian warlord stepped forward, his massive form towering over them both. He regarded John with something between admiration and hunger, like a predator sizing up its next great conquest. "The power inside you was never yours," the warlord said. "It was locked away for a reason. Valek brought you here so we could claim it, so we could take it back." John's fingers twitched and a bolt of energy crackled between them. His instincts screamed at him to lash out, to tear everything apart. But deep inside, something held him back. A single question. "Why?" John demanded. Why go through all this? If you wanted the power, why not kill me and take it? The warlord's smirk widened, because it does not work that way. He gestured toward the massive chamber doors, and with a deep metallic rumble, they slowly slid open. Beyond them lay a colossal hall, larger than any human-built structure John had ever seen. The walls were lined with ancient artifacts, pulsing with dormant energy. And at the far end of the room, standing like a monolith of forgotten history, was a massive throne, carved from obsidian and gold, humming with the same blue energy that flowed through John's veins. John's breath hitched. He could feel the throne pulling at him, calling to him. It wasn't just a seat of power. It was the source, the forgotten flame. The energy buried in his blood had once belonged to the ruler who sat upon it, and John was its heir. His knees nearly buckled as more memories surged into him, not his own, but those of the one who came before, the first warrior of the flame, the one who had locked its power away to prevent another war. The Chthorian warlord's voice echoed through the silence. "You were never meant to be a soldier, John Carter." He stepped forward, his crimson eyes burning. "You were meant to be a king. The last choice." John's pulse pounded in his ears. He had spent his entire life thinking he was ordinary, a human, an engineer, someone who fixed things. Now, he stood at the center of a war he never asked for, being told he was ***, the last of a lost lineage. ***, the rightful heir to a power older than most civilizations. And he had a choice: take the throne, or destroy it. John turned to Velik. "Was this your plan the whole time?" Velik exhaled, something unreadable in his eyes. "Yes, and no." He took a step forward. "I knew what they wanted. I knew you were the key, but I never intended to let them control you." John's fists clenched. "You sure have a funny way of showing it." The warlord let out a deep, guttural laugh. "It does not matter. The choice is his now." John felt the weight of the moment pressing down on him. If he took the throne, he would have unlimited power, enough to reshape the galaxy, to rebuild what had been lost. He could end wars before they started, protect entire civilizations from destruction. But he would also become what the Cathari once were, a ruler with absolute power. John looked back at the warlord, at Velik, at the army that had gathered to witness this moment. Then he made his choice. The final battle. John lifted his hands, and the forgotten flame surged outward. But he didn't direct it toward the throne. He directed it at the warlord. The blue energy tore through the air, slamming into the Chthorian leader with a force that sent him crashing through the hall's far wall. Gasps echoed from the gathered warriors. The energy still burned through the chamber, the walls pulsing with its power. John turned to them, his voice ringing through the space. "No one should have this power." His eyes burned bright with blue fire. "Not them. Not you. Not me." He raised his hands higher, and with a roar, he unleashed everything. The throne shattered. The energy that had been contained inside it for eons burst outward, tearing through the hall. The temple rumbled, its foundations cracking apart as the power that had been buried for centuries was finally set free. The Chthorian warriors panicked, their leader still reeling from John's attack. The entire fortress began to collapse, torn apart by the very energy it had tried to control. Velik stared at John in disbelief. You destroyed it." John exhaled. His body still burned with the power, but now it was fading, dispersing into the air, no longer locked inside him. "No one should be able to decide the fate of the universe alone," John said, stepping back. He looked around at the crumbling temple. "That's how we got here in the first place." Velik hesitated. Then, slowly, he nodded. "Perhaps you are right." The warlord rose, his body sparking with energy, fury burning in his crimson eyes. But it was too late. The fortress collapsed inward, taking him, and his empire with it. John and Valek barely escaped, sprinting through the crumbling corridors as the energy tore the structure apart. They reached the surface just as the ground beneath them cracked open, swallowing the last remnants of the ancient war. And then, finally, silence. John stood there, staring at the ruins of what had once been a throne of gods. Valek turned to him. "What now?" John let out a long breath, watching as the blue glow finally faded from his skin. "Now," he said, his voice calm for the first time in what felt like forever. "Now, I go home." Epilogue. A new beginning. John Carter never saw Earth the same way again. He had left as an ordinary man. He returned as someone who had changed the fate of an entire civilization. But he didn't seek glory. Didn't tell anyone what had happened. Because in the end, he wasn't a ruler. He wasn't a warrior. He was just John Carter. And that was enough. Valek stared at John in disbelief. You destroyed it." John exhaled. His body still burned with the power, but now it was fading, dispersing into the air, no longer locked inside him. "No one should be able to decide the fate of the universe alone," John said, stepping back. He looked around at the crumbling temple. "That's how we got here in the first place." Valek hesitated. Then, slowly, he nodded. "Perhaps. You are right." The warlord rose, his body sparking with energy, fury burning in his crimson eyes. But it was too late. The fortress collapsed inward, taking him. And his empire. With it. John and Valek barely escaped, sprinting through the crumbling corridors as the energy tore the structure apart. They reached the surface just as the ground beneath them cracked open, swallowing the last remnants of the ancient war. And then, finally, silence. John stood there, staring at the ruins of what had once been a throne of gods. Valek turned to him. "What now?" John let out a long breath, watching as the blue glow finally faded from his skin. "Now," he said, his voice calm for the first time in what felt like forever. "Now, I go home." Epilogue. A new beginning. John Carter never saw Earth the same way again. He had left as an ordinary man. He returned as someone who had changed the fate of an entire civilization. But he didn't seek glory. Didn't tell anyone what had happened. Because in the end, he wasn't a ruler. He wasn't a warrior. He was just John Carter. And that was enough.